All right, so the name of today's talk is Straight from the Heart. The song was Put a Little Love in Your Heart, and that was by Anne Murray. We're going to be talking about the Pali Canon, so the Tripitaka and the Dhammapada, the three Tripitakas. Tripitaka is the word that means baskets, so there are three different baskets. We're going to be talking just a real quick overview of Buddha's life. I did do a whole talk on Buddhism in September, just a couple of weeks ago, so we will not be talking about the Four Noble Truths or the Eightfold Path. I will give you the link when I send it out in case you missed the one that was in September. So we will be talking about have you got both the head and the heart. We will be talking about Buddha quotes on the heart, the living message of the Dhammapada. So we talked last week about everyone being a piece of God and that we need to love each other unconditionally. Buddhism believes that the heart and the mind are connected. They are one, and they call it the citta. So since we had the study a few weeks ago on the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path, I wanted to look today on the Buddhist teachings about the heart and the mind. First, we will have a little overview of Buddhism. We will be focusing on Theravada Buddhism. There are three different schools, so we will be talking about that. And then we will finish with some Buddhist quotes on the heart, and then here's what I know. So 2,500 years ago, a royal Indian priest named Siddhartha Gautama was sitting under a Bodhi tree in the city of Bodh Gaya, and he had an awakening and he became forever known as the Buddha. So again, the talk that I did was on 9/10/23, if you need to go back and look up that. He attained enlightenment at the age of 35. He had spent 6 years searching for the way to liberate himself from the bondage of suffering. He spent the next 45 years traveling to Indian villages and towns teaching the Dharma or the cosmic law. He died at the age of 80. 400 years later, the teachings had been passed down orally from one generation of monastics to the next. This all changed at the Fourth Buddhist Council in Sri Lanka in 29 BCE. The scriptures were produced that year under the direction of the king Abhaya, and they are now collectively known as the Pali Canon or the Pali Tripitaka. They are widely considered the oldest Buddhist canonical texts. Much of what makes up the Pali Canon is reserved for monastics, but other parts become popular among the monks and the lay people. The most important part of the text is the Dhammapada. It is 26 chapters of doctrine. It translates into the path of the Dharma. There are 423 verses. They are, Buddha received information through several different years of his life. And so he passed these on verbally, and then they came to be all written down and as the Dhammapada. They are sayings of the Buddha. It is considered one of the most widely read and best known Buddhist scriptures, written in Pali. Pali was the original language. So the 425 verses and the 26 chapters are also known as Vedas. They are grouped together according to the themes of what they're talking about. They cover all aspects of human condition, ethical conduct, philosophical insight, the principle of mindfulness, right action, the development of wisdom, living life in accordance with the Dharma, the cosmic law, and order. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the Pali Canon. The Pali Canon is also known as the Tripitaka. It is in the Pali language. It is the doctrinal foundation for Theravada Buddhism. So Pali Canon Tripitaka is three baskets. So there are three of them. The first is the Vinaya Pitaka. That is the rules and regulations for the monastic community and guidelines for the monks to follow. Number two is the Sutta Pitaka. That is the largest section that is broken down into 5 different collections of suttas. So suttas is the word for sermons. So the first is the Digha Nikaya, that is the longest discourses. The second is the Majjhima Nikaya, that is middle length. The Samyutta Nikaya is the connected discourses, that's number 3. Number 4 is the Anguttara Nikaya, that is the numerical discourses. And number 5 is the Tudatta Nikaya, and that is the minor collection, and that is the place where the Dhammapada is. So the third of the baskets is called Abhidhamma Pitaka, and that is the philosophical and doctrinal analysis and interpretation. It is much more abstract than the other 2 pieces. So the Pali Canon is regarded as the most complete and authoritative source in Theravada. It is the earliest recorded Buddhist text. As I said, it was written in Sri Lanka. Before that, it was written, all of it was preserved orally. So a lot of the writings are actually more like poetry than like prose. So people memorized every single word. The monks, part of their jobs was to memorize every single word, and so they passed everything down. So it's not so much like our New Testament, the Christian New Testament, where people had stories and they told stories, and then all the stories were told to each other, and then they were written down. In this case, they were literally word for word memorized. So every single one of them was exactly the same, word for word. And it was in the Middle Indo-Aryan language, which is Pali. And that was the language that is closely related to the Buddha, probably the language that he would have spoken himself. So I'm going to talk to you about a message I found called The Living Message of the Dhammapada. It is written by Bhikkhu Bodhi. Bhikkhu Bodhi is a monk who now lives in New York City. He was ordained in Sri Lanka. He is the founder of the Buddhist Global Network. He fights hunger and empowers women. That's what his mission in his life is. So when I was looking for someone to study, I thought he's the perfect one. So he says it is an inexhaustible source of guidance and inspiration. It contains boundless wisdom and great compassion of the Buddha. The goal of the study is spiritual freedom, liberation for the mind, and deliverance from suffering. So it is broken down into 4 parts. The first part is the human good here and now. It talks about having happiness in the area of human relations, being at peace with ourselves and our fellow humans, fulfilling our responsibilities, and removing any conflicts which inflict our relationships with suffering to the individual society and to the whole world. So it is what we call guidelines, what they call precepts, based on the concerns for one's own personal integrity and considerations for the welfare of for whom those of our actions will affect. The most general advice is avoid all evil, cultivate good, and cleanse one's own mind. The counsel of all the enlightened ones, it is considered, exercise self-control over the body, the speech, and the mind. Adhere to the 5 moral precepts: abstinence from destroying life, from stealing, from sexual misconduct, from lying, and from intoxicants. Treat all beings with kindness and compassion. Live honestly, control your desires, speak the truth, and live a sober and upright life. You should fulfill all of your responsibilities as parents, friends, and family, and to recluses and to Brahmins. The key to solving the problem of violence and cruelty they talk about is the ancient maxim of deciding how to treat each others based on how you would like to be treated yourself. Obviously, that's in the Christian Bible as well. He says, I myself tremble at violence and wish to live in peace and do not want to die. Thus, putting myself in the place of others, I should recognize that all other beings tremble at violence, all wish to live in peace, and all do not want to die. The Dhammapada teaches that the true conquest of hatred is achieved by non-hatred, by forbearance, by love, and that when you are wronged by others, you must be patient and forgiving. The qualities that distinguish a superior human being, according to Dhammapada, are generosity, truthfulness, patience, and compassion. By following these ideals, we can live at peace with our own consciousness and in harmony with all our fellows. The quote is, the scent of virtue is sweeter than the scent of flowers or perfume. So part 2 is about having good in your future life, and that talks about the law of karma. It ensures that our morally determined actions do not disappear into nothingness. So morally determined meaning we're making a conscious decision about what we do, and that we're the function in a way that our good deeds eventually issue us happiness and success, and our evil deeds give us misery and suffering. The willed actions, those that we make a conscious decision to do, that we perform, have long-term consequences that correspond to the moral quality of the original action. Our willed actions determine the sphere of existence into which we will be born after death. All embracing law ensures that the ultimately moral justice will always triumph. To follow the law of virtue leads upwards to happiness and joy, and it leads to a higher state of rebirth. Part 3 is about finding the final good, the path to the final good. He says the mature disciple aspires for deliverance from ever-repeating round of rebirths. The ultimate goal to which the Buddha points is what they call nirvana, the deathless, the unconditional state where there is no birth, aging, and death, and thus no more suffering. He gives guidance pertaining to the practicalities of these disciplines and how to make them work in your day-to-day life. And he does all that in the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path. The Four Noble Truths are suffering, the origin of suffering, the cessation of suffering, and the Noble Eightfold Path. The cause of suffering is craving, yearning for pleasure, possessions, and being. It brings sorrow, anxiety, and despair. So long as the subtlest sign of craving exists, we are not beyond danger of being swept away, he says. We gain release by the Noble Eightfold Path. We means to destroy craving and break free from the entire process of rebirth. Fully purified wisdom we will have, complete understanding of the liberation of truth. So he cautions us that we ourselves must make the effort. We must do the work. So the Buddha provides guidance, but we are the ones who actually have to do the work. It is most feasible to those who have devoted themselves to living fully the holy life. They want to have a new lifestyle that relinquishes all worldly concerns and minimizes distraction and stimulants to craving. So in order to do that, they establish the Sangha, which is a group of people that are also on the same path that will support you in your growth. The Dhammapada speaks throughout of the benefits of the monastic life. So again, a lot of it was written for people who want to be monks, but regular lay people have tuned into it and started liking it as much, but they talk a lot about all of the benefits of being a solitary life. They discuss meditation and the development of insight and the path of purification. So part 4, the last part, was the highest goal, the way to break free from all bondage and suffering and win the supreme peace of nirvana, the stage of full liberation here and now. They discuss the attributes of arahant. Arahant is one who is totally set free, transcended all obstacles, passed beyond all sorrow, peaceful and fearless and without craving. So as I said, I wanted to take a look today about the heart and the mind, and the Dhammapada has a lot to say about the heart and the mind. The Venerable Rathanasara gave a talk on, do you have both the heart and the mind in your life? And he says the head represents wisdom, understanding, and intellectual capacity. The heart represents human values and virtuous qualities, such as compassion, goodwill, friendship, generosity, and loving kindness. The heart represents virtues and the brain represents wisdom. You need both virtues and wisdom to lead the pure, righteous life and to be a noble human being. The Buddha teaches that people who only have the brain qualities and not the heart qualities, whatever skills they have, are only going to destroy them in the end and destroy the world. The Buddha encourages us to develop both compassion and wisdom. Generally speaking, religions encourage the heart qualities, that of faith and virtues, but Buddhism has the perfect balance between the heart and the brain. In the first 2 factors of the Noble Eightfold Path, we start with having right understanding instead of mere faith, which requires brain qualities such as analyzing, questioning, and learning, and right thought, which comes from developing the heart qualities through thoughts of generosity, loving kindness, goodwill, and compassion. These 2, right understanding and right thought, provide for the process of transformation for all practicing Buddhists to train and develop both the head and their heart qualities, eventually will lead them to the attainment of enlightenment. So Jack Kornfield, you've heard me talk about him many, many times, brilliant spiritual teacher, talks about the jewel in the lotus. That is the actual translation of the universal compassion mantra, Om Mani Padme Om. The explanation of the symbolism is that compassion arises when the jewel of the mind rests in the lotus of the heart. I just love that. The awakened mind together with the tender compassion is what will bring liberation. In the Buddhist psychology, the mind and the heart are often described as one. The word is citta. The heart mind has many dimensions. It contains and includes all of our thoughts, our feelings, and our emotions, responses, intuition, temperament, and consciousness itself. In Western culture, our heart and mind are typically seen as separate. Our mind is what thinks, reasons, and figures, while our heart is the feeling and emotional aspect of ourselves. In Buddhism, the two are seen as one, the heart or the mind or the citta. So I pulled from the Dhammapada some quotes about the heart. I could have given you 25 pages, but I pulled the ones I like the most. Set your heart on doing good. Do it over and over again, and you will be filled with joy. Sometimes it's better to be kind than to be right. We do not need an intelligent mind that speaks, but a patient heart that listens. You will not be punished for your anger. You will be punished by your anger. The way to happiness is to keep your heart free from hate, your mind from worry. Live simply, give much, fill your life with love. Do as you would be done by. When you move your focus from competition to contribution, life becomes a celebration. Never try to defeat people, just try to win their hearts. Like a mother who protects her child, her only child, with her own life, one should cultivate a heart of unlimited love and compassion towards all living beings. Your purpose in life is to find your purpose and to give your whole heart and soul to it. As rain falls equally on the just and the unjust, do not burden your heart with judgments, but rain your kindness equally on all. Okay, so here's what I know. We are taught by Buddhism that the highest goal is to break free from bondage and suffering and to win supreme peace of nirvana, to reach a state of full liberation. I have learned that a lot of craving, other than sense craving, is all wrapped up in the ego. The ego has a constant need to do better, to be better than others, to have more, to be respected, to gain others' approvals. The ego needs to be number one, the biggest, and the best. It's the ego's needs. If that is our constant focus of attention, we will never break free from bondage and suffering because we will always want more. We will constantly be competing, and that sets us apart from others. That causes separation between us and others, and that separation is what causes the suffering. What we truly need to be free from suffering is to focus more on the heart. Buddha says the way to happiness is to keep your heart free from hate. That means acknowledge our oneness, not our separateness, loving each other instead of competing, helping each other so that we can all be happy, joyous, and free instead of only worrying about ourselves. He also says, when you move your focus from competition to contribution, life becomes a celebration. Never try to defeat people, just try to win their hearts. I titled this talk Straight from the Heart because I believe we can only be free from suffering when our words and our actions come straight from our heart. That means being more authentic, taking off the facade, not wearing a mask, and showing people our true selves. I lose lots of serenity and cause myself lots of suffering when I try to portray an image of who I think I should be. When I am more concerned with what people think of me than I am with being my true self, and acknowledging some will understand me and some will not. Suffering for me comes from pretense. Getting older has in so many ways been so liberating. I have so much less concern for people's opinions of me. Suffering comes from trying to be what I am not, square peg, round hole. Liberation comes from allowing myself to be who I am and allowing you to be who you are too. And there again comes the heart part. Buddha says one should cultivate a heart of unlimited love and compassion towards all living things. Love yourself first, then you can love all the others. Bhikkhu Bodhi says the main teachings of the Dhammapada are avoid evil, treat all beings with kindness and compassion, live honestly, control desires, and speak the truth. I have found a direct correlation between times when I don't follow those practices and the suffering that follows. As I understand it, avoid all evil is not knowingly causing any harm to anyone, not putting my own needs above anyone else's welfare. Treating all beings with kindness and compassion means not judging and imposing my own beliefs on anyone else, as well as being generous and loving. As I understand it, living honestly means letting go of pretense and the false self and includes speaking the truth. As I understand it, controlling desires is not doing what I impulsively want to do, even though I know it's bad for me. I have learned that if I can make choices based on what my heart tells me to do instead of my mind, I am better off and have less suffering. The Dhammapada is filled with so much wisdom, the Four Noble Truths, the Eightfold Path we discussed in September, and it also has extensive guidance on how to live from the heart mind and not just the intellectual mind. I believe one day at a time, one person at a time, we can make a difference, showing love and compassion, allowing ourselves to be exactly who we are, so we can allow others to be exactly who they are, being honest, authentic, and real, speaking and acting in a way that comes straight from the heart. And so it is. Remember, at all times, the power is in you. It always has been, and it always will be. All right.